Metal Madness.
Yo, welcome to Mad Warriors Metal Madness, y'all. Sorry, I couldn't help it. This is Mad Warrior. I'm doing another episode of this podcast, and I know it's been a while. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I became busy with the last couple of months, but I'm trying to balance things out. I'm gonna definitely get more balance as far as this stuff goes and release more episodes of this. So sincerely apologize about my enormous fan base of people that listen to this podcast. But anyways, that beginning music, some public domain thing I found. I looked up NU metal, new metal with Umelat, you know, the infamous metal, quote unquote metal that came out in the mid 90s, early 2000s. So that's what this episode's about. It had a beep in it because it was like you had to purchase it. So I just decided to say fuck it and just do it anyways and just put that little sample in there. That's actually not the worst thing I've heard, you know, but I'm going to do this episode about what my whole history with that subgenre of metal, quote unquote, is. And I'm also going to say that hopefully I didn't do any episodes about this so far. I think I have talked about it in previous episodes, but I can't remember. That's a good sign. I've done a lot of episodes now that I can't remember if I talked about this, but maybe there'll be new revelations if I have. So I don't think I have. Like, I've never done an episode just about new metal. So I'm going to look up the Wikipedia. I'm just doing this live. We're doing it live. Of new metal, but in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and go do the news real quick here, because that is a tradition that I'm not going to stop. All right, here we go. So we got the blabbermouth.net up. First head, I'm just going to go down like the first page, probably. Not that many pages. Just a little bit. I don't want to do this for, like, I think I've done this. I did it for not a whole episode, but like half an episode. I'm like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. But hopefully those will be up by the time this is still relevant. So Zakk Wylde says he has been learning Pantera songs for a while now, reveals partial set list for upcoming shows. So in this article, what I've noticed is that he is using YouTube players to learn Dimebag solos. I don't know why I find that funny. I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a little mean, but you know, I was watching some Bark at the Moon stuff that he did. Like, he was doing Bark at the Moon solos from like the last 15, 20 years. I'm just like, dude, you need to like do what you're doing with Dimebag and learn the solos of J.K. Lee. That's Ben, forgot his last name, Ben something rather, on YouTube. It does a great job at it. Plus, they have the stems out there, too, to learn. Nickelback, never mind. Never mind, I'm not going to talk about Nickelback. It's just, there's certain things that I'm not going to talk about on this podcast. I'm just going to remain neutral on that point. Triumph welcomes new Hockey Hall of Fame. I haven't really heard a lot of Triumph, honestly, just a couple hits. Jane Weinberg, up about Slipknot. Yeah, we're going to talk about Slipknot today, by the way. We're going to talk a little bit about them. I never played my drums without hearing Protection. Okay. Original AC/DC frontman, sings Highway to Hell, Moonspell, Drugs and Alcohol, Sebastian Bach, Whole Lot of Love. Whoa, what's going on with this? Excited Maiden's singer Paul Di'Anno explains why he once compared Steve Harris to Hitler. Wow, dude. Well, yeah. I don't know. That's a little extreme. I'm not going to read the story. I just want to read the headlines so we can get down to it. Former Children of Bodom members will officially launch bar and band museum. Cool. Eric Martin thinks there are big things coming from Mr. Big, or believes there are. Oh, I'd love to see Paul Gilbert play again. Corn's Monkey on, sorry, I'm not going to talk about, I'm going to skip all the NU metal stuff and like talk about it in the podcast. That'll be like your treat for me being on Blabbermouth for news. I'll get to talk about all these bands in a few minutes. C. Gorman, Black Crowes, are they really metal? I like a couple of their I like some of their work though, like the Jimmy Page stuff they did. I don't know why I liked that because I'm very mixed on Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin, but I liked the Black Crowes like with Jimmy Page for some reason back in the day. I don't know if I'd like it now. Simone Simons, Charlotte Wessels, and Mike Merker come together on new Epica song. Wow, that's interesting. Ted Nugent wants to sit down with Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis to bring two great conservative leaders together. Well, he's going to probably be confused if they both run. That's hilarious. By the way, I'm just going to say right out, Ted Nugent, regardless of his politics and stuff, which I'm not going to comment on in this episode, he actually is really, his 70s material is such an inspiration to people. Amboy Dukes are a great band, etc. So when people, what bothers me about Ted Nugent is when people just like attack his entire musical career just because of his politics, like they don't like separate the art from the artist or whatever, or the current artist. And then the hypocritical talk about underage girls with him too, when Jimmy Page, speaking of him, and all these other people were into that too. So whatever. But they have the right, they support the right, not the current thing, but the right thing. So they're exempt. They're excused. Those other people. But anyways, that's not meant to be political. Because I just hate all politicians and politics right now. Obituary performs new song The Wrong Time. Okay. Alice Cooper, KK Downey, and Mick Box among musicians wishing Dave Ellefson happy 58th birthday. That's cool. I like that. Behemoth. I'm sorry. I keep calling him Behemoth. I'm so out of it sometimes. Taps drummer John Rice for South American tour. You know what I did like? I'm going to talk about things I do like in this on this episode. I just, out of curiosity, I never really heard a lot of their stuff, but Watain, I bought their newest album, and I'm just like, this is great stuff. I mean, just epic, crushing black metal. I'm going to have to get into more of their stuff. I've been very disappointed, unfortunately, this year with a lot of the new releases. Honestly, like there's been very few that I really thought were like worthy of the hype. I'm not going to say which ones I didn't think were, but that is actually a really good album. I'm going to say album of the year because I haven't really heard anything that's like that good so far. The new Watain. I haven't even heard that much of their stuff, so it's kind of a weird thing to say, but Stone Temple Pilots, are they metal? I don't know. Styx, even less, but mourns death of his wife of 50 years. That's pretty sad. Judas Priest, manager, explains why Richie Faulkner wasn't inducted in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think it should be, I'll just use some pleasant terms. I think it should be shut down. I'm not going to be as extreme as I am in other places in life, but yeah. Nita Strauss and Alyssa White Gluz. I don't even know how to pronounce her name. Alyssa White Gluz. Interesting. Some video that they did. Then Temptation. Metallica. Yeah. Disturbed. Wow, with Ann Wilson. That's interesting. Weird combination. Steve Piercy. Okay. Oh, that's kind of cool. So Steve Piercy says his upcoming Legacy collection will include song co-written by Jakey Lee. That's kind of cool. Hawkwind's Nick Turner dead at 82. That's sad. I actually saw Nick Turner's Hawkwind. It was called that because it's not like Dave Brock and all those people. They played with Sleep of all people back in the day, and when I was a tiny tot. I'll just say that. I saw them live. It was a great show. Now the thing is that it was very slickly produced. You know, it was kind of more 80s sounding Hawkwind kind of sound, not the 70s kind of more not grind, but like, you know, more grimy kind of spacey kind of proto-punk thing. It wasn't like that. It was a little more 80s-ish sounding. So I didn't enjoy that as much as Sleep, because Sleep just were incredible. This was like 93 or 94, the Holy Mountain tour. A lot of people are jealous of me for seeing that, but there's a lot of shows I missed that I really regret too. So really regret missing. Watch John 5 play along with Motley Crue's Too Fast for Love. So I guess it's official that he's a replacement for Mick Mars, which I actually really like John 5. I don't like, a lot of the bands that he's in, but his solo work is outstanding. He really has a unique thing that he does with like the bluegrass influences and all this stuff. I actually want to get more of his stuff. I think he's a brilliant guitarist. Now, that said, I don't like a lot of the stuff he chooses to do because he underplays in a lot of that. So Matt Sorum is not waiting on a call asking him to rejoin Guns N' Roses. So this is what I had to say about the Guns N' Roses reunion. It's going to be controversial. I do not like the drums, how they sound in Guns N' Roses right now. I think they could have at least gotten Matt Sorum, if not have Steve Adler play part of the show, just have them both play different eras, And God damn it, get Izzy back too. It's ridiculous. That's just my opinion. The Offspring, I don't care about the Offspring. But for some reason, I've been enjoying the third Green Day album lately. Pantera, quotation marks, confirmed for 2023 Sweden Rock Festival. Queen pop-up store to open in Tokyo. I'd like to go to Japan sometime. Newfound Glory. Who? Sorry. I've never actually heard Inbound Glory. Inbound Collections. I used to do it. That was my job. Pierce the Veil. I don't know who they are. Godsmack. I'll get to that. Oh, I forgot. I violated my rule. Just as like a teaser, Godsmack is not as bad as some of the other bands that were in that genre. I will say, I hear that really cheesy song, what is it called? Voodoo or something like that, or whatever. I don't even remember. But, I hear that on the radio. I'm like, this sounds like a Jim Morrison influence or something. It's not that bad, I hate to say it, but it's true. Four of Japan's biggest rock stars. Let's see if... I see an ex-Japan guy in there, I think. If I'm looking at it right. Oh, yeah. Yep, that's him. Yoshiki. Not Hide, but Hyde. It's different. So I don't know how to pronounce these names. Sugizo and Miyavi. Yeah. Oh, well, that is kind of cool because I might have to check this out. Because he's actually writing songs in this band. So, and considering he wrote most of the a majority of ex-Japan stuff, I'm gonna actually have to check them out because they're one of my favorite bands. Oh shit, I skipped some stuff here, or I accidentally went to Google. Let's see what else we have here. I'm just gonna do a couple more things here because that actually was revealing. Because I saw his shadow in there and I knew it was him. Judas Priest, yeah, okay. Megadeth. I'm just saying, I just kind of go through these Typo Negative reunion rumors, sort of, not reunion, but what the hell happened here? I'm going to some weird AdSense thing there. Says Peter Steele, okay, so they're thinking about doing some kind of Pantera, what Pantera, quote unquote Pantera is doing now. New Steve Vai album, Lacuna Coil. I just kind of go through these. Behemoth's Nergal opens up about pandemic era touring. Says now is not time to start a new band. So that's too bad. I'm starting a new band, dude. Sorry about that. What would the guys in Watain say about that? Sorry, I'm just being a little weird. Chad Kroger has heard... Oh, I'm not going to read that. Chad Kroger. David Draymond. Iggy Pop, Steve Harris, Blackie Lawless. Just want to see something exciting and crazy. That would be interesting. Because I like to scour these for really weird stuff or really out of the box weird stuff people say or do in metal. Richie Sambor doesn't rule out reunion with Bon Jovi. I just have to ask why. It's obvious he can't sing anymore. Sorry, Bon Jovi. It's obvious he's charging a lot of money for tickets of not being able to sing. Why not just get someone younger like you had, your wife or girlfriend was this younger woman that played guitar and you did that music with her and it sounded pretty good. Do something like that again, but maybe get some, one of these Swedish bands, like one of their singers, Crash Diet, or not that, I think they're finished, but like Crash Diet or Heat or whoever. Some of these younger guys, Crazy Licks, get one of those singers and do like a new like Bon Jovi with them, Even like get Desmond Child from what he's doing, write some cock rock with that. I'm just making a joke. That's what they used to call all hair metal, is cock rock, but whatever. Testament. Former Helix guitarist found murdered. Wow, that's messed up. Sodom frontman, band's heaviest, blah, blah, blah. Unreleased Van Halen song, supposedly. I don't know. Ex-Iron Maiden singer Blaze Bayley. Some of the people that hate me actually have never listened to what I do. I actually agree with that. Ross the Boss says Joey DeMeo firing him from Manowar was the worst possible mistake ever made. Well, I actually really do want to interview Ross the Boss. It would have been I've been thinking about trying to get that. I'm going to have to say this. It definitely led to a trajectory that was not good in the long run. So I don't know. I haven't read this. I'm not going to read the article because I'm just going to do this short sequence here. I don't want to do a super long news bit here. So what? Oh, this is interesting. Wasp Blackie Lawless has changed his mind about Operation Mindcrime being a better album than the Crimson Idol. Interesting. I'm going to read this. This is interesting to me. During a VIP, I listened to stuff I hadn't heard in ages. Oh, because he was, okay. For the longest time, this is kind of weird. For the longest time, I thought Mindcrime was a better record. I really did. And then I thought, I don't know. Whatever. Okay. He's kind of, I don't know. He's kind of saying they're equal or whatever. Whatever. I don't know. My personal opinion is I really do like the Crimson Idol, but Operation Mindcrime it took place. I mean, it took place. I was, as in my childhood when I heard that from my bigger brother and watched those videos, because he had the video cassette, Operation Mindcrime video cassette. We didn't know who killed Mary and all that. It was kind of like Twin Peaks, where who killed Laura Palmer for a while. It was just a pivotal moment of my life, and I still remember just watching and listening to that album over and over again. It's one of my favorite albums, so I cannot say that it's better than Wasp. I can't say that Wasp is better, I should say. Oh, okay, here's some more controversial stuff, finally. Sharon Osbourne, this is where I'm going to leave off and go to the new metal subject. Sharon Osbourne calls Bruce Dickinson a fucking asshole, says he is jealous of Ozzy. Now, I don't understand how Bruce Dickinson would be jealous of Ozzy, because Iron Maiden sold like 100 million albums. Now, in America, they're not as I don't know, because some of these shows with Iron Maiden are pretty huge now in America. But it's so stupid. And I know Bruce does like to shoot his mouth off himself and just say a lot of stupid stuff sometimes, like he said about the pot thing, a couple weeks back. I'm just like, dude, you're in rock and roll. People smoke pot. I'm sorry. I know you had throat cancer. I know Steve Harris hates pot smoke or whatever, but dude, you're in a rock band, rock and roll has been about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, So trying to be some Puritan about pot is really dumb, really misguided. But other than that, I don't think she has any leg to stand on. I mean, you can argue that some of those first two Iron Maiden albums had some songs, just like Sharon Osbourne, like to rip off former band members for songwriting and stuff. There's some sketchy stuff with the first two Maiden, like with Charlotte the Harlot, and even like Hallowed Be Thy Name and stuff. There's a little bit of stuff that's there that's disputable about some of the songwriting credits or how they were doled out, or some of the stuff that they took from other bands. Just like a couple of different little things here and there. It's like 2 or 3 different little things for the most part. Like Hallowed Be Thy Name, has some lyrics from that one. What's that band called? It's like a prog band they really worshipped, or Steve Harris did. But he also covered them and gave them a bunch of royalties. So, but yeah. So Sharon Osbourne is, just a complete hypocrite, just a complete idiot about. And I don't care. I don't care if I am ever banned from interviewing Ozzy Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne has been a negative force in metal and rock for many years. Now, she did help launch Ozzy's career. She did help manage him and manage some other bands. She helped come up with the Ozfest thing and all that stuff. That said, she deserves all the criticism that she gets. She deserves all the criticism for how she has mistreated Bob Daisley, Lee Kerslake, Phil Soussan, and many other people. J.K. Lee, for one of my favorite guitarists. It's complete a travesty compared to even Iron Maiden. Even Iron Maiden, as they have some imperfections, obviously, and Bruce Dickinson has some imperfections, but they have 1,000 times more integrity than Ozzy. The Ozzy camp has. They've never, even like Blaze, the Blaze thing, like when they kicked out Blaze to get Bruce back, I mean, they helped secure him management and help him find, people to, I don't remember the whole story, but they did help him out. They did use some of his ideas on Brave New World that they didn't give enough credit to, another example. But I think they were supportive of him, though, of him going on his own. So, and then they also played they played some of his songs afterward too, and they gave him credit, like Lord of the Flies, or they did versions of stuff off X Factor and off of Virtual 11, and they gave him credit and stuff, and he continues to get royalties for those songs, I'm sure, like Future Real, I believe he co-wrote that. But yeah, I mean, he's gonna, unless that's just Harris, I'm trying to remember. I know Lord of the Flies or one of those other ones is definitely him co-writing. So he continued to get royalties. They continue to give him credit for what he did. But, like Judas Priest doesn't even talk about Ripper, and Ozzy, the Ozzy camp has been just the most sketchy business practices of any musical corporation probably that there is. One of the most sketchy things, and goes back to Sharon's father, Don Arden. He's like involved in, well, I'm not going to say, there's some criminal accusations, and Black Sabbath did not like him either, after a while. So it's like daughter, like father, like, or whatever. So I think it's ridiculous, and for her to throw stones in a glass house is pretty ridiculous. And of course, the reputation of Ozzy has been very dampened by what's happened with Sharon Osbourne. You see this in the comments. You look at comments on any article of anything. You know that the population is divided on something. If they say, even if the mainstream media will say something, and then you never hear about the other side, you'll see it in, if you see enough people just commenting on things like that, then that it's, that's probably, there's more to the story. But yeah, Ozzy Osbourne is a media creation in part, is a manufactured, musical icon, quote unquote. And I love the first 5 Ozzy albums, first 4 Ozzy especially. And I think they're brilliant because of Bob Daisley writing writing a lot of the music along with other people. And, Ozzy did have some input too. But anyways, speaking of the perpetuation of nu metal, which the Ozfest was, let's get to the subject at hand. So I wrote down a bunch of stuff about nu metal, trying to get the sun out of my eyes. It's coming through the shades. I'm going to put on some sunglasses just a second here so I don't have to see the sun glaring in my eyes. There we go. It's a little better. But can I read the thing? No, I can't. Oops. Okay. So let's begin. So this is how I heard of nu metal. It wasn't even called nu metal at the time. And what happened was, there was this dude in high school that he didn't really like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and stuff like that, but he liked Black Sabbath and Fear Factory, Machine Head, and Pantera and stuff like that. So he was like, I would call him like a proto nu metal guy, but really at the beginning, what really happened is that there were bands, a lot of which I liked. Suicidal Tendencies, Faith No More, even like I wouldn't say Fishbone, but like 24/7 Spies, just different types of bands that came out at that time that were mixing like punk, funk, metal, and maybe ska, or even a little bit of prog or whatever. Like you can't deny like Faith No More has a little bit of that in there. So there were these bands coming out. Suicidal Tendencies were one of the first bands to have a 7-string guitar used that's not Steve Vai or Willie John Roth or a jazz guy from back in the day. In other words, using that open B string some of the time. And I don't know about on Lights Camera Revolution from 1990, but I do know in the You Can't Bring Me Down video, which I didn't know until like I was watching it more recently. Rocky George is playing stuff on a 7-string. So you can really hear it on Art of Rebellion, which a couple of years later. And that really, like, as bad as it sounds, as much as I like that album, it kind of, has obviously like an alternative influence, like psychedelic, like Sleep at the Wheels, like this psychedelic kind of alternative rock song, metal song, whatever. And really that was the beginning of some of that stuff, because what happened was you had bands like that. You had the first Rage Against the Machine, which I think is 91 or 92. You had bands that were kind of, doing funky stuff with a little rapping or a little bit of, more syncopated kind of stuff. I guess Gain of Four, I believe, is a band that was like played riffs like that earliest, like in the post-punk thing. I think it's like Gain of Four I'm thinking of. So you had that kind of style was really like, was embryonic at that point. Now, there are a lot of albums coming out that I will give credit to that are, I would not consider nu metal, but they definitely pointed the way to some extent. And other stuff that might be lumped into it that shouldn't be, but is good anyways, I'll point out. So like, for example, with The Ladder, the first Body Count album is a crossover punk metal classic, in my opinion. It's not I wouldn't consider it rap metal at all. I mean, Ice-T sort of raps on a couple of songs, but it's mainly regular hardcore vocals, So that's a classic album at this point, also known as Cop Killer or the self-titled album, depending on which version you got or what era it was, because, he reissued it as Body Count instead of Cop Killer. That was originally the name of the album. But of course, all the controversy and stuff that he got for that. So that was going on, and he had a lot of rap was getting popular amongst a lot of people that metal was traditionally popular with, so, and, suburban kid, white kids, I'll just say it right out, because that's what was going on. Like, that wasn't an audience or a market that was really popular with rap at first, but it was becoming a huge thing. And times were changing. The 80s style of metal was not as popular. You had, Pantera dressing in flannel and stuff, and like talking about how streetwise they were, or macho or whatever. So you had a lot of this stuff coming out. Machine Head, like their first 2 albums, definitely had like a proto nu metal vibe to me. And then you had some of the groove metal bands that were watering things down even more and more every album. Now a lot of the groove metal bands I really do like some of the albums that people hate, like Sepultura's Arise, or not Arise, Chaos AD. I really like that album. I never thought of it as like a shitty album like a lot of people did. Another album I really like I think is underrated is Napalm Death's Fear, Emptiness, Despair, which definitely isn't nu metal, but it's definitely a groove metal influenced album for Napalm Death's purposes. I like that a lot. I got it when it came out back in the day because I'm old. Because I'm an old man. So, yeah, I think a lot of the groove metal stuff, hopefully, I'm hoping this looks okay on here. Yeah, I think it's okay. So, a lot of the groove metal stuff was definitely a precursor to nu metal because nu metal kind of took some of the groove metal elements and then watered it down further, unfortunately. Mixed it with more alternative sounds and rap. That's basically what you have nu metal. With a particular way of writing songs. And I would even dare say like a little bit of industrial. This is why. Not industrial, but, like Nine Inch Nails, which, argue it's industrial rock or whatever. And this is why. Because a lot of the whiny kind of vocals of early Korn or whoever really remind me of Trent Reznor's like stuff. But I don't like it as much as Trent Reznor, of course. Now, one alternative history that we can go to is a very kind of pivotal moment was the movie Judgment Night, which came out, I don't know if it was, I think it was 92 or 93. And that had these collaborations between metal bands and rappers. You had Slayer and Ice-T, you had House of Pain and, God, who was it? Biohazard. All these different bands that collaborated. Now, that Judgment Night soundtrack, I think, is better than any nu metal album because it sounded more fresh. It had a better feel to it than a lot of the stuff that came later, in my opinion. So that's how I thought. And then I think I heard the first Korn from that dude in high school. Played it on a Walkman. I was like, yeah, I'm not feeling it, dude. I just didn't feel it. Now, one of the problems that I had at the time was, the people were talking about that stuff, and I'm just like, there's something missing, from the groove metal bands too. Like me and one of my best friends, we're into Pantera a little bit, but then, we kind of got sick of Pantera pretty quickly, and he started listening to, and I was in the closet about death metal, but I still listen to a lot of it. But because back then I was kind of a sort of a pseudo Christian, I guess you'd say. So I was scared of the satanic stuff, even though I sort of listened to it too. Like, for example, there was this cover band that played Deicide and Morbid Angel covers that played at this youth club in my town where I live called, I'm not going to give their name, because I don't know if I should, but they were really good. And we used to go see them all the time, but I wasn't like listening to Deicide that much, or I was not into Deicide, but I liked Morbid Angel a little bit, I guess, but I didn't have any. And I was like kind of trying to distinguish myself by saying I liked grindcore because it was more political or whatever, like Carcass and Napalm Death, which I did. But just the problem that I had with like Korn and stuff like that was like, okay, well, I just got off by, let's say I had something in the Walkman, like let's say I had Harmony Corruption by Napalm Death. It's just, for the time, it was one of the most brutal things that came out. Then someone's playing this like sort of funky, atonal, but like sloppy stuff with whiny vocals called Korn. Sorry, that's just how I felt at the time. And I was like, okay, so this is supposed to be like this is supposed to be kind of a metal thing, I guess, sort of alternative. I was just like, I was just unimpressed. It's like it's not that it means to be extreme, but I just couldn't relate to it. I just didn't feel it. See, like the Teen Angst thing, I'd already been through because I was a huge Black Flag and Rollins Band fan. And Suicidal Tendencies, DRI, all sorts of bands like that. So, like, I couldn't really I couldn't just latch on to this whole, like, nu metal thing, or proto-nu metal thing at the time, Now, in retrospect, there are bands that I do like that are sort of nu metal classified, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but I'm going to go a little bit more into what I thought at the time. And So that was kind of what I was into. So what had happened by late high school is that I didn't really care. There was a short period of time, I'll just say, where I wasn't as into metal because I was kind of exploring gothic rock and industrial and some, experimental techno stuff that one of my friends got me into, or helped get me into. Actually, two of my friends got into some of that stuff. So it was kind of an interesting thing. It's like, well, I guess I should get into this stuff because two of my best friends are getting into it. But I actually like it to this day. I love Skinny Puppy and Sisters of Mercy, and even like picked up the first Susie and the Banshees recently. I like a lot, and I love Aphex Twin and all that stuff. So that was kind of like one thing that I got into late high school. So I wasn't into the new metal thing skipped me just in many ways. So I even saw Marilyn Manson open up for Nine Inch Nails, and I don't count that as new metal, but it's kind of going that way, sort of. I just didn't feel it. No, I loved Nine Inch Nails, but there's something was missing from Marilyn Manson for me. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Whatever, I wasn't feeling it. I mean, I respect him as far as like the, kind of the rebelliousness of what he did and stuff back then, but like I just couldn't dig it. And I love a lot of the stuff he listened to, but I just couldn't. Now there is an exception to the Marilyn Manson thing, is that some of those early Florida demos, I heard them recently. I'm like, hey, this is pretty good, but I just, the produced albums, I don't know, just something just doesn't click with me for it, So that's what I got to say about Marilyn Manson, which I clump in because it's kind of the same era and some of the same audience as new metal. So maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's controversial. Now, there were a lot of other bands coming out. There was like by the late 90s, it was an interesting time period because I got back into metal. And some of the early stuff that I got into was like black metal, power metal, or, some of the newer stuff I got into was black metal, power metal from Europe, and these expensive overpriced imports that were like $30 a CD and $50 for a t-shirt, because like that's what I did, is order all this stuff from Europe. And I was reading Metal Maniacs at the time. And they did talk about some new bands like Candiria, some stuff like that was actually like kind of had a lot of variety, like that might be lumped into some of that stuff, or like hell, even like post-hardcore stuff or hardcore stuff like the Neurosis or something. But that stuff, I exempt that from this like sort of critical analysis of new metal, because I just think that stuff is, I don't know, it just has more of what I like, I guess. So I put that on my sheet of paper that I wrote to do this this episode. So yeah, the Korn came out, and by then, by like by 97, 98, I was back into hardcore, actual, like getting into like a lot of different kinds of metal that I hadn't been before, because one of my friends, actually he was on this podcast. One of my friends had like a Century Media catalog and stuff, and like another friend had the Relapse catalog, and we, just got, read all about all these bands. It was like, whoa, they did an album about, and I read magazines. Oh, they did an album about J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh, I'm going to order that. That was Blind Guardian, one of my favorite bands to this day. It's like a lot of stuff just hearing the new metal stuff. Like, I'd rather just listen to like the early Cure or something if I want to hear some alternative, quote unquote, rather listen to the Judgment Night soundtrack if I want to hear rap metal or, whatever. It's like, I just couldn't dig it, because the elements that were mixed together just kind of, to me, they fell short of what the potential was there. Not being a big rap fan either, I mean, that certainly didn't help me liking the stuff either. But the rap thing's a little overhyped into the thing, other than like Limp Bizkit. But yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of the new metal thing. And then just the thing that bothered me about new metal is not even that it was popular. It's just that it became like the overarching like thing that you had to like if you were into metal in the mainstream, or you were talking about metal. Like Metallica did their Summer Sanitarium tour, which I think I've talked about. Or Limp Bizkit and whoever the hell opened up. And I was like, yeah, this is like, why can't they bring out, I'm trying to think of The Haunted, why couldn't, I mean, I think they did later or something. They brought out more actual, like, deeply European metal bands later, but, I mean, why couldn't they bring out bands like that, or Deceased or something, Why do they have to bring out like Limp Bizkit and fucking Korn and all these bands? I just couldn't get into it. The riffing style of new metal just bothers me because it's like, it's not even, I like a lot of punk music. I mean, I like a lot of punk even that has 2 chords and shit. But somehow new metal, just the way that they wrote the songs were just very dry. And then you had this dryness, I call it dryness musically. And then you had, oh wow, you probably heard that little beep. You had like this dryness, and then you had like this really like kind of whiny thing added on top, and then there was rapping, because rap had gotten so big that it was just kind of getting obnoxious. Because if you liked metal in the 90s, you were expected to like rap instead. And I did get picked on a little bit for liking metal when you're supposed to like rap as a teenager. So it's kind of funny, but yeah, it just bothered me. So that was kind of the beginning of that. So I'm going to go into like really where I do see some artistic flourishes in new metal that I don't mind. Now I'm going to begin with the obvious, but actually not the obvious. Okay. So Limp Bizkit, the most hated band in metal or rock or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what you want to call them. Metalarchives.org or whatever, they have them. It's Encyclopedia Metallum, their famous encyclopedia of metal bands. They used to say you got dursted if you got kicked off the forum or whatever. They really hated Limp Bizkit, and people hated them. Now, recently, I'll just say this, like, I don't like Limp Bizkit. I never will like their music. But I find it pretty hilarious now. I watch their videos. I just find it funny, and I think they are always in on the joke, which I didn't realize until more recently. Like, I didn't know that they had it. Up until recently, I didn't know they brought a huge toilet up on stage. I didn't know that they called them. They said that they sucked, kind of like KMFDM does, or KMFDM said about themselves too. They said they sucked and they were terrible. They just didn't. They didn't have, like, they had a sense of humor about their own music and about their own inept abilities as musicians. Not that they're that bad. I mean, the drummer is pretty good, and the songs they wrote were kind of annoying though, and they acknowledge that. That's kind of cool. I kind of have a little, like, it's not a guilty pleasure. I would just say, like, a tiny smidge of respect for Limp Bizkit now because of that. Now, Korn, it just is way too serious for me. Daddy and all this stuff. I just, it's just like, see, I already heard all that stuff. Life of Agony's Blood Runs Red. I mean, it's like about abuse or whatever I think it is. I don't even remember. All these other albums that I just thought were better than what these bands were doing, I had already been through all this stuff. Like, some of the elements that these bands had, I already heard in a different group that I thought personally, my personal subjective opinion, did better. That's the main thing right there. Call it metal elitist or whatever. I just thought it was done better by a different band. Some people don't like. I talked with someone that hated melodic death metal, Melodeath, because they thought they shouldn't mix Iron Maiden with death metal. I respect that, even though they liked Iron Maiden and death metal separately. I respect that. I used to be like, oh my God, that's so bad. But I'm just like, yeah, okay, that's your opinion. You just don't like that mix. And with new metal, I didn't like the mix, how they mixed the things. The elements together just didn't sound right to me. Some people don't like Melodeath for the same reason. I don't love Melodeath. So it's just an objective opinion. Who cares? Now, the thing that bothered me is where quote unquote mainstream normies, you would tell them about a band, let's say, I'm going to use Carcass as an example, because I just remember this interview with, was it one of the Korn's guitarists, and he was like, we don't want to sound like, we got the B strain out, but we don't want to sound like Carcass or some shit. It was like they were dissing like death metal, but like the early Steve Vai albums. So that's why they got it just doesn't make any sense, of course. So if you heard Rika Putrefaction and you were going to play me, hell, even Far Beyond Driven versus Rika Putrefaction, I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, and I like Far Beyond Driven, at least the first half. It's like there's no comparison to the extreme. You know, if you were trying to say something's more extreme, like, oh, this is extreme, man, this is extreme metal, and new metal wasn't really about being extreme, but it sort of was in a way, like being heavy, a lot of heavier stuff in the underground. I'm just saying, you know, but you know, there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. It was just weird. So one of the things that I hate about new metal was the lack of, just the laziness of the genre and a lot of cliches. You know, you had your Alien Ant Farms and all these bands that got popular later on that were just totally milking the whole thing. But one of the most annoying things about that was that at the time, playing a guitar solo was not cool. And that came a lot from the grunge alternative, like, oh, your wanky 80s hair metal sounding guitar solos. Fuck you. We could play just with 3 chords. We're great heroin addict grunge guys. Yeah, it's pretty annoying. So as a young man that was, you know, trying to learn a guitar, how to play guitar, it was pretty frustrating, you know, just like knowing that if you played a solo in a band live, it's like you'd be like laughed at by certain people. Oh, it's so cock rock, you know. It was pretty annoying. So that was one thing about new metal that really bothered me too at the time. So you had bands that played solos like in other types of metal still, but it's just new metal. They just hated to learn how to know how to play anything. It's not that all bands need solos, you know. I mean, a lot of bands don't have a guitar solo, and that's fine. But it became such a ubiquitous thing. That's a ubiquitousness of a lot of these musical trends is what bothers me. It's not that the actual traits of the trend aren't really that threatening to me if they just exist on their own. Like now you have so much of a more pluralized musical culture where someone could listen to something that has a wanky solo and then something that doesn't, you know, and there won't be like, oh, you listen to this cock rock solo, you know, or whatever. It's not as like stratified in that way. So that was really annoying. So it was really dumb, you know, just to be into all this stuff that was coming out from Europe and elsewhere, you know, even prog metal from the United States. And then everybody you were talking about metal said, oh, you like Korn? You know, I'm like, no, I don't. You know, it's like, it just got really dumb. And that was kind of what I didn't like. It was the ubiquitousness of it. And it got really annoying because a lot of it's just very juvenile. And it's not juvenile in like a lot of times it's not juvenile in a fun enough way, you know. Obviously, Limp Bizkit can get away with saying their stuff was ironic or whatever, but like Korn and like all these bands that came out, they really didn't have. I think they did take themselves too seriously a lot of the time, and it was like something that you couldn't take seriously as much because it was so out there, like ridiculous. Some of the stuff, you know, like Black Flag never took themselves completely seriously. I don't know why I keep mentioning Black Flag, but it's kind of like a teen angst band that was popular in the 80s amongst certain types of people. And we're talking about the 90s and late 90s and stuff. So I'm going to get to the brass tacks of what I actually liked, what bands I did like in new metal. So I'm going to say, and some of this is kind of coming out of the closet about some of the bands I actually like or liked. So I always thought System of a Down were decent. I liked a lot of their musical variety that they did, and just the way that they wrote songs and structured songs and stuff. And I mean, I would hesitate sort of to call them a new metal band, but they are, I guess. They had just so much going on compared to a lot of those other bands. And they were, you know, they're probably the benchmark of the good artistry of new metal with System of a Down. And so, yeah, I don't own any of their albums, but I will, if I saw it like, like a CD for $20, or not $20, for like $2 somewhere, I'd probably pick it up, So I like them. Seven Dust, even though they have some of that post grunge stuff, which I should have probably added that into this episode. Post grunge it's separate, but it's not. It's intertwined with a lot of the new metal stuff, which gets pretty obnoxious too. Probably more obnoxious in some ways than actual just pure new metal, because it's like kind of like how industrial and goth are kind of intertwined to some extent. It's like you have new metal and post grunge, like Nickelback, Creed, fucking what is this? Whatever. I don't even know all the names of the bands, like Seether. Oh, just all these different bands that came out. So I would say that, yeah, System of a Down. A friend actually turned me on, and I haven't really heard much of their stuff, honestly, to Dead Sea. They're pretty interesting. Kind of an interesting band. Someone was talking about the other day with me about the first Static X album. It's not bad. It has some Ministry kind of sounds on it. It wasn't that bad. Now, the first Slipknot official major label album is not my forte. A lot of the people that got into that and tried to play it for me back in the day were like, this is so heavy. I'm like, you haven't heard anything really that heavy if you think this is super heavy. Now the rhythm section is really cool, but there's even like this this vocal melody on the first official, quote unquote, Slipknot album that is cribbed from a Stone Temple Pilots song. Don't ask me which one, but you would hear it if you listen to the album. It's like something like that. I forgot what the song is, but So I never liked Slipknot. Korn, that first album, it's it just leaves me bored, honestly. And I like a lot of droning kind of metal. I couldn't get into it. To this day, I really can. I mean, there's a couple parts that are kind of cool. Like if I want to listen to something dissonant, listen to Voivod or Swans or like even Neurosis, which I should probably listen to more. Other than the guy being canceled lately, but I'm not going to go into that in this episode. But like, I just didn't like the presentation or the way the elements were mixed together. That's a major thing with new metal for me. Mudvayne, I saw them open up for Anthrax, I think it is. The bass was interesting, how the guy was just punching his bass the entire show. I mean, there's stuff I like better than Mudvayne. I never really got into them. They're a little bit better, a little bit above some of the really bad bands, but Nothing Face. I don't even know all the names of the bands. There's some of these bands, like Crazy Town, or I don't, those are like that. The Crazy Town was probably seen as like the teeny bopper version of that. But Limp Bizkit, obviously I don't like them, but I think they're kind of hilarious unintentionally now. By the way, if you haven't seen it already, I would watch. It's free on certain streaming platforms. It's the Fanatic, which was directed by Fred Durst and features Devon Sawa and John Travolta, and I forgot the girl's name, but that movie is off the wall. I highly recommend it. Actually, it's so bad it's good in a way, kind of like Limp Bizkit in certain ways. Now there's one contentious band that I will admit to liking. So this is what happened. Like, new metal was big and I made fun of it, and I had this girlfriend that kind of liked some of those bands. It was all right, and I'd listen to the radio and stuff. And all of a sudden, this second album by this band, who I'd seen open for Danzig of all people, who I didn't think was the worst I'd heard, but I really was kind of bored by their stuff, and some of the sounds that were uttered from the vocalist were pretty animalistic, you'll probably already guessed who I'm talking about. And that's the second Disturbed album. I I don't know why I like it, but I do. I like the vocal melodies, and the crunch on the guitar was closer to metal, quote unquote, to me than like Korn's tone or like Limp Bizkit's. Some of Limp Bizkit's later albums had a little more raunchier tone, more metalized, but that loose Mesa Boogie rectifier tone. It's an amp. I own it. Actually, I own that amp, and I play it with my band. But I play it a little different than these people did. But yeah, you have that tone that's a little tighter on the Disturbed albums. The song structure is a little bit more slick in a certain way, but it actually works to some extent, in my opinion. That the vocal melodies and the hooks on that album are pretty decent. I mean, I dare say that I actually listened. It was probably the most I ever listened to a new metal album was the second Disturbed. It's embarrassing. I know a lot of people hate him, so that's why I'm saying this. And later the guy, Dan Donegan or whatever, he started playing guitar solos again. It was like this big deal. He's playing a solo again. Solos. It was so stupid and ridiculous. Why didn't you just play solos from the beginning? I mean, he was in like 80s metal bands too, where he played solos. Some of these guys, like the story between, pardon me hitting the mic there. Some of the stories with these guys is that they were like literally like orgy. Like those guys were like from Rough Cut. Like some of these guys were actually 80s metal dudes that knew how to shred, but they just like underplayed on their new metal band's albums. It's like, oh, I'll just play like just these 2 chords the whole song, I'll do something like a little atmospheric right here, and that's it, man. I just imagine in the studio, like they had to hold back for the bottom line, But then they started playing solos again sometimes, and it's kind of hilarious in my opinion. So you had that, and that was the album that I like by Disturbed. Some of their other stuff is, it's okay. It's another new metal band I like. I said System of a Down. It's Dead Sea. Disturbed. It's as controversial as it is. Now, Slipknot's first demo, which they called their first album, but they called their first demo, or their not first demo, but their demo album, independently released album, is not bad either. Has a lot of Mr. Bungle-isms on it that weren't on their actual major label albums. So that's another one I kind of like. Danzig's new metal sellout albums. I'm not going to say sellout, but the albums he did that were kind of new metalish, like 666. Some good stuff on there. In retrospect, even better than I used to like it. I like it a little more now. Let's see. Trying to think of more stuff that new metal albums I liked. I think that's pretty much the gamut of what I like in new metal. I'm gonna look over the list here on Wikipedia again, and I'll let you know. Let's see what else I liked. So I forgot about Dead Sea. Deftones, they're not as bad as some of the other ones. Cold. They're kind of influential in a way. Duran Gray, I don't know if they're new metal. I don't agree with that. There's a lot of bands in this list that you really wouldn't necessarily call new metal. Drowning Pool, no. Sorry. That just reminds me of I'm not going to go into that stuff. But Evanescence, okay. That's another one that I didn't think was too bad. Some of their more quote-unquote gothic kind of stuff was kind of cool. I liked some of those songs that came out. I didn't like the rapping in that one famous song, Bring Me to Life or whatever, but yeah, it's okay. Godsmack, like I said before, some of their stuff I don't mind. Kid Rock, no. Sorry to say, I don't know how I should be in this podcast, if I should be like that. I guess I'll never interview Kid Rock. Big deal. Methods of Mayhem, like a Mushroom Head. They were, kind of like that first pre-major label Slipknot, but sort of in between that and actual Slipknot. But I think they were before. Papa Roach, no. Pod, oh my God. Haven't heard that name for a while. Puddle of Mud. Rage Against the Machine, I never was a huge fan of. Saliva. Why do they count Stabbing Westward in there? Stained. I'm not even going to go into that. You can probably guess. Stuck Mojo. Stuck Mojo is an interesting case. I don't really consider them new metal. They were actually more rap metal for real. It's hard to explain what the difference is, but like, it's like if you were actually rapping two actual metal riffs and actually rapping other than like this half-ass, like white suburban middle class rapping, you know, I'm just being completely transparent here. Stuck Mojo were a little better. Definitely a little better. I never got into them, but I respect them more than some of these bands on this list. Smile Empty Soul. That's like kind of a post-grunge. Tantric. Trapped. Oh my God. Okay. I'm just going to come out and say this right now. Yeah. Should I even say this stuff? I don't know. I don't think I'll ever interview any of these bands, so I'm not going to feel too bad about it. But if you like it, that's your right. This is just how one person feels, you know. I have the right to my own feelings. Trapped are the worst that ever existed, but also one of the most hilarious because it's so like faux macho kind of stuff. Headstrong, I'll take on anyone. Yeah. I'm trying to find more stuff. Rob Zombie. Now that's an interesting case because I wouldn't really consider him new metal. More like industrial rock. But that first okay, if you want to count it as new metal, the first Rob Zombie is one of the best. Okay. First Rob Zombie album. Solo album. I like it more than Astro Creep. I like La Sextistro better than Astro Creep, but I like Rob Zombie's first solo album more than Astro Creep. So I don't know what it is about that album. I more recently got into it. I'm like, you know, this is kind of like goth stripper music. It's kind of cool, you know? It's kind of cool. I kind of like it. It's kind of neat, you know? And I will make no apologies for liking it. I just do. Soulfly. Now, that's an interesting band to include because their early stuff's definitely new metal because of Roots from Sepultura. But, you know, their later stuff's definitely more like, I wouldn't call it metalcore, but like post-thrash metalcore influence stuff, you know? Which is actually pretty superior to the early material, honestly. Case in point, they weren't even on Metal Archives until like their fourth album where they started playing solos again and stuff, you know? Baby Metal, I don't think they're new metal, but whatever. Yeah, what else is on here? Earshot. Oh, my God. So this is my story of Earshot, and I don't really care what people say about this because this is just like one of the most cheesy things I've ever seen in my life. And say what you will, about this, but this is one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen in my life in a band because it's so cheesy and so corporate rock. Okay. Now, corporate rock, you don't have to have me explain what I mean by that, but I'm just going to put it this way. So I saw Earshot open up for Exodus, who are great, and Megadeth. And Earshot was a band. I don't think Dave Mustaine was actually really happy with having these kinds of bands. He's later come out and said this. But, so the record label said, oh, this is this new rising band, man. It's called Earshot. I guess they're named after a Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode. That's interesting. I don't know if that's true or not. But there was like a PA announcer that says, Columbia, or wait, what record label are they on? Presenting. What is this on? I'm gonna do the whole presentation here. 2002. Wow, that was the year of new metal, but it almost like that. Warner Brothers. I thought they were on Columbia. I'm just gonna say it like I thought they said. Columbia recording artist Earshot. We present this upcoming. It was like an announcer, like announcing what record label they were on, what band was playing, like before they played. And it wasn't because like the show wasn't being like emceed by anyone or anything either. It was just a completely bare show, like where the bands would just come up on stage. But for some reason they had like this announcement in the beginning. I was like, that's the most cheesy shit I've ever seen. And the guy was, the singer was like doing all these poser like Maynardisms. Like they sound a little like Tool, some of their stuff. He was trying to do like this Maynard kind of stuff like on stage. You could tell that he was studied like old Tool videos to do his poses and stuff. And I was like, holy shit, what the hell is this band doing with Megadeth? It was just awful. All right, I don't care. I've kind of jumped the gun into this like really distant bands, but it was bad, dude. I mean, Henry Rollins dissed bands for years, so I don't feel that bad. He still disses you too. Endo. Yeah. So let's see, what else is there? Dead. Try Kill Logic. I don't know about that. No, there's a lot of them. So yeah, there's a lot of these bands. So Kitty, they have some good stuff. Like their first album's pretty new metal, but they weren't always new metal. One of my buddies liked them, so I kind of defend him a little bit. And he was trying to play me like the third album. He's like, this is pretty heavy. I'm like, yeah, wait, it kind of is. I'm just laughing because, I was pretty snobby about it. Let's see. 1 Minute Silence. I didn't know that they were new metal. Orgy, kinda. OTEP, I don't know, post-hardcore. Some of these bands are like different genres and they're listed as Rammstein. Come on, that's ridiculous. I guess they appeal to a lot of people that like new metal. Vanilla Ice, obviously he did his new metal albums, which are pretty hilarious themselves, but kind of fun in this like guilty pleasure way as well. So, I mean, I guess from a distance, it's not as bad as it was back then. But when you're like trying to like have this agenda as like keeping metal alive in the 90s because you got back into metal after being kind of an alternative kid with a Jinkos like I had. Not counting the new pair of Jinkos I bought recently just because of just nostalgia, retro, like ironic sort of kind of stuff. And they're big pants. You can fit a lot in their pockets. This is pretty awesome, actually. But yeah, like what was I saying? What was I talking about? I mean, what I was trying to say is like, geez. What I was trying to say is like some of this stuff from a distance is not as bad as I probably said it was at the time, but it's like when that's all there is in the mainstream metal consciousness of metal, what metal is to people, then that's when it sucks. Other than like Black Sabbath. Oh, there's Black Sabbath, Ozzy, and like new metal. And maybe a little bit of Judas Priest here and there for some people. But even Iron Maiden wasn't that big until like, well, the new metal was getting bigger, and then Maiden came back. But it was annoying, But it is what it is. It is history, and that's what happened. And that's kind of my history with new metal. I make fun of it, and I get all hyperbolic about it sometimes just to like make a point or whatever. But it's not the greatest thing to me. It never was. It just was. Just never the right mix of elements. Like I said, like if you want to rap, do it, like the Judgment Night guys or, even Rage Against the Machine sounds better than a lot of the new metal bands. And I don't even like them that much. It just had these elements that I didn't like mixed together and wasn't the rapping. See, people want to say like, oh, I'm sure there's some people out there that are like, oh, you're like anti-rap or, even want to say some other things about, people that don't like new metal. It has nothing to do with that. You just don't like this like sort of it's like this sort of dorky guy that is like not even a good skater, but I'm just going to like give this like impression of what like the stereotypical, like the worst impression of a new metal artist would be. And then I'm going to conclude the episode. You have this guy, he's like 15 years old. He has a backwards baseball cap. He's this white kid from like Orange County, California or something. And he buys like a Dr. Dre album, in high school. And he has like a Pantera album, and he has like a Steve, or not Steve Vai, but he has a couple albums like that. Maybe Jane's Addiction or something. Let's just say. So he starts rapping and he tries to skate, but he's not even that good. Like gets made fun of by real skaters and stuff. He's kind of a dork, but he's kind of a jock, but he's kind of like wants to get into fights too, but he's a rich kid too. And then he forms a band and it's a new metal band. That's pretty much what it is, man. It's like, you have this thing, like you have this certain type of person that is a metal dude, in the 80s, they're a metalhead. And I'm not saying this is like some kind of like genetic thing, but it's like almost like this thing with class, like, but like same with him with new metal. It's like you're like upper middle class, dorky white kid that likes some of this stuff, but like doesn't know how to do it in this way, but like kind of fails upward into the new metal pantheon of music. Well, that's all for this episode. I will see you later, and you'll see more episodes, not see, but hear more episodes and more interviews coming soon.